Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ExCommunicated podcast. I'm Jess.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Arthur.
And if you are new to the podcast, we are two ex-Christians, and we have our brother Arthur here as a guest today. He's not both of our brother.
That sounds really weird.
Sounds religious.
With brother Arthur.
We've brought brother Arthur
Oh,
with us today.
Our brother in Christ.
Yeah.
No.
We have the resident heathen Arthur.
Yes, the lifelong sinner Arthur with us here today. Tom and I were both in the Christian dogfights outside.
So hello everyone and welcome.
They literally waited until we started recording to
always
have an absolute dog mashup outside.
If you actually look out the window, you can see they're all there waiting, and then they see us start. It's like, right, go!
They waited till the red light went on outside
Yeah,
the house
that's
and
it.
they knew it was recording. Let me try again. So Tom and I were both in the Christian religion for just too long. Just 10 years for me, Tom's whole life. And we've recently left our faith, we're deconverting, and we just like talking about the whole process. And Arthur is here, my brother, not Tom's brother.
Brother Arthur.
Brother Arthur. And today we will be talking about the Word of Faith Fellowship. We're going to be doing part 2. Yeah, so last week we introduced the Word of Faith and just basically did a very brief rundown, and it took us almost 2 hours.
Yeah,
we thought it
sure.
would be a really simple intro episode just to...
Right,
Dogfights!
should we relocate to a different place? Should we move house?
We
just
should move
completely
to a marshmallow or something.
Yes. Oh, that's the dream.
Good thing none of us have plans for this evening, isn't it?
So woof woof woof.
Got a lot of bloops for this episode.
Bloops. You've got an hour's worth of us dicking around to choose from at the end for your stinger quote.
And just waiting for the dogs to stop.
Yeah.
Please. We need better windows. I think that's what this is telling us.
Do you have windows in here?
So if you missed last week's episode, it was Word of Faith Fellowship Part 1, where we kind of just introduced the characters that you would see in the church, basically, what they're known for,
Sure.
some of their very, very disturbing practices. And then we also did go through the list of rules that members have to stick to. This is an alleged list of rules that we found online, and WOF actually do completely refute this, but then you would if you were running a very strict, secretive church. So
Absolutely, and those rules were crazy.
they were, we were laughing at the time of reading them because it was outrageous,
Sure.
not because we were mocking it at all, but the rules,
Yeah.
oh my God.
I've made sure not to wear anything with Nike on it today.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Jane would
Yeah.
allegedly be happy with
Yeah.
that. So if you haven't listened to episode 1, I think I'm just going to give you another brief rundown or a reminder. The Word of Faith Fellowship is a Protestant non-denominational church in Spindale, North Carolina, known for their infamous list of do's and don'ts. It has been the subject of several allegations where it was described as a cult and accused of abuse. Word of Faith Fellowship began in 1979 when Jane Whaley and her husband Sam converted a former steakhouse to a chapel. She was a math teacher and he sold used cars before they started the church. Jane Whaley led the group as it grew from a few people to 750 and added almost 2,000 followers in related churches internationally. Though Jane Whaley had no formal training in ministry, she was described as a compelling and charismatic speaker and leader. Yay!
Yeah, very scary. I mean, you find this all the time, don't you? That people that do, I'm going to say cult in sort of speech marks, but people that start these cults or start these large organizations, they are literally just charismatic people, aren't they? Really, that people just want to follow.
Yeah, people don't want to follow people who aren't charismatic.
Yeah, sure.
That's how you're literally drawn to these leaders
course,
and
yeah.
these cult, leaders.
I had a thought that I wasn't sure at what point it would be interesting to bring it up, but Alex mentioned it to me today when we were talking about the part 1 of this episode.
Sure.
We sort of wondered whether people who end up being the leaders of these cults or very oppressive churches and these sorts of things, to what extent do they sort of set out to do that kind of thing, and to what extent it just spirals out of control?
Yeah.
Do people get up one day and think, I'm going to start a cult where everyone can't shave their head or wear certain clothes, or do they think I'm doing the right thing?
And then it just they kind of lose the grip on how much
Sanity.
they're controlling. Yeah,
Yeah,
literally. That's a good point, actually, because I can't imagine most of these people do literally just wake up and go, I want to control people.
Yeah.
It's more subconscious than
Absolutely.
that, isn't
I
it?
just think even about the Plymouth Brethren, I mean, they are doing it out of, as far as they're concerned, following God's will, not I'm going to control everyone here. We're just following what the Bible says.
Yeah.
So
And even as a wider point, you could argue that about the religion in general. Like it started off as a story about a cool guy who was doing good stuff.
sure.
To try and keep people morally,
Yeah.
in quotation marks, morally good, and
Yeah.
and then it gradually just takes over people's lives. And I think the more power you get, and maybe the more you realize people will listen to you, it could just get out of control. It could spiral. You use the right
Yeah,
word.
sure.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, I think eventually you do become aware of the fact that if you're a charismatic personality, you can control people. And I've told the story before about me actually saying I can get any money I needed to for this church in the Philippines or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I can do that because I knew I could control. And so I think these ministers are fully aware of what they're doing.
But again, you were doing that out of a place of good. You thought you were trying to raise money, and you weren't standing up there saying like, I'm gonna control
I'm going to
these.
manipulate these people.
Yeah.
You were doing it for a good reason, weren't you?
And it's because you knew they would help and you knew they would give the money, but you weren't, beforehand thinking, I'm going to hurt them mentally. Ha ha ha.
No, but I was fully aware of what I was doing, and I think that's why it's quite it's remained with me for a long time, because I knew what I was doing.
You regret that.
And I regret that, and I knew that I was manipulating people. I knew that, okay, it was all of these people could say, well, yeah, but I need the jet because it's going to enable me to go to far lands to preach the word of God.
You weren't doing it for personal gain, though. Like a cult leader is doing it so that these people stay true to them and faithful to them, and they can control people's behaviour.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I was aware, and I think these other people are fully aware. I think they know. It might start off all innocent, and I think they might all start off, Jane might have started off with a little list of, everyone, just park in the right places, please. Look, there's some disabled people that need to get and park right next to the church. Can you make sure you park on the right-hand side or something, And then all of a sudden it's like, look, guys, look, we're coming into church. Can you not wear jeans? It'd be really nice if you dressed up smart. And I think the list just got bigger and bigger. Now, I think she's fully aware of what she's doing. But initially, it might have started out innocently. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. I think so.
At the end of the day, no one thinks they're the villain, do they?
No.
No, you never do. And you're always doing it for reasons. Whether they're good or not, you do believe that there's a reason that you're doing all these things.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, the list, though, is just the control that she has. Like, she has a church of 750 people, and they have to check with her before they can buy houses.
Yeah.
They have to check with her before they can buy a car. They have to check with her before they start dating someone.
Yeah.
It's like she's an authority in their life, allegedly.
Yeah.
Not a church leader. I can't ever imagine any of our church leaders making them, making us meet with them.
No, but you can...
Before we buy a dress.
Yeah, I mean, that's bizarre. But likewise, when we were involved in a church plant, they wanted us to move into the area.
Yeah.
And to move house. And they were encouraging other people in the leadership to move house into the area.
And they chose the house. I forgot that.
Yeah, so actually, in that sense, okay, not quite the same, but yeah, it was not expected, but please do it. Type thing.
Strongly encouraged.
Strongly encouraged. It'd be great if you're, planting a church. We really do need everyone living in the area, and I know that's in our circumstance, but I've heard that many times before.
Yeah.
Where people are encouraged to move into the area where you're planting the church. I mean, it makes sense, to be fair.
It's not quite the same as what's going on in Word
absolutely.
of Faith, though.
But
not
again,
to downplay what's happening on this list.
No, but what I'm saying is, that's the slope, isn't it? And it might have been, again, she started that way and now it's gone batshit. I mean, it really is crazy. But initially, she might have had right motives, but not now. No way.
No. And another one of their very very controversial practices that we talked about last episode was blasting.
Oh man, yeah.
Which is something I don't think any of us have heard of before. And it's a very unique form of... I don't even want to call it prayer, because that's not what this is. But it's a type of prayer, in quotation marks, that they practice at Word of Faith, and it is basically screaming, shouting, punching, holding people down to expel demons. Because they believe, and Jane teaches, that every single problem that people have are caused by demons and caused by Satan.
Yeah.
So the demon of homosexuality, for example,
Sure.
they will blast the people that they believe are burdened with these demons, and it can go on for hours, and it's very traumatic, and it even happens to children. So I think that's another reason of why they're so popular. Not popular, but well known.
Yeah, certainly.
Because the things that they're practicing are very extreme.
Yeah.
So that's kind of everything that we talked about last time. I just want to give a quick disclaimer before we get into the victim stories, which is what I'm going to be reading today. All of this that we're going to tell you is information I found and compiled online. Just because we're interested in the story, we're not claiming any of these things ourselves.
Sure.
I'm not making claims about Jane Whaley or Word of Faith. I'm just reiterating things that I've researched.
Yeah.
Mostly from interviews and from YouTube. There was also a Discovery Plus documentary that we saw called People Magazine Investigates Cults, and it's episode 6 of season 2. That is really hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth watching as well if you've got Discovery Plus. It's only, 50 minutes, something like that, 50 minutes. And they do a really good job just as an overview of the actual cult itself. But certainly worth watching.
But all of my sources that I got all of these quotes from and all this information from will be listed in the description of this podcast. And don't take my word for anything. Please go do your own research.
Sure.
And probably the most helpful information I got was from the AP News Investigates, where they interviewed over 40 ex-members, and I've got a lot of quotes from their interviews here as well. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. I think today's going to be a very heavy episode because of that. It's a lot of personal stories of what this church puts people through, and it's... Allegedly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be quite intense, I think. So shall we get started?
Yes, let's. Oh.
So the first ex-member story that I'm going to be talking about is Ben Cooper and his wife Micah Cooper. Ben, who is one of the 9 Cooper children, was 7 years old when his family joined the Word of Faith Fellowship and started living on the church compound. He was exposed to the blasting prayers from around the age of 12 and stated that for him it was mainly used as a form of punishment. In one interview, he described it as a violent group exorcism. Now, can you imagine being 12 and being exposed to blasting?
Yeah, because it's not exactly just one person shouting at you, is it? Like your mother giving you a stick, like, what are you doing? You know, shouting at you because you did something wrong. We're talking, there are like maybe 20 people,
it could be
adults around you screaming in your face. I mean, that's just awful, isn't it?
And sometimes being physical as well. There were people punched, there were people pushed, there were people,
pinned down and stuff.
Yeah,
sure.
I can't even imagine that as a 12-year-old, and from the age of 7, certainly seeing it. He wasn't maybe involved in it till 12, but it's just got to be absolutely awful.
I mean, intimidating as well, and
the sound of it is quite evil.
But also the fear that you knew that if you had done something wrong, as a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old, thinking, shit, if I do something wrong, they're going to blast me.
Yeah.
You'd be terrified, wouldn't you? It's just like, man, I don't want that. It's.
I don't know to what extent it truly is an exorcism in air quotes, and how much of it is just intimidating the people that are meant to be beneath them personally.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking this as I was researching it, because I can't actually include any of the clips of the sound here because I think all of them are going to be copyrighted.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
the sound of blasting is just purely evil. And I can't imagine being an adult and wanting to inflict that on a child. Like,
Yeah, that's true, actually.
as I was watching some of these videos, I was thinking they cannot think they're doing something good to that child.
No.
They must be enjoying it in a certain way. Like, this was my thought process of, like, I wouldn't do that because I wouldn't want to scare the child, I wouldn't want to hurt the child. So to be able to do that,
Yeah.
how can you be thinking it's helping? Like, screaming for hours in the faces of children.
Yeah, sure. I mean, not quite the same, but I remember I used to belong to a house group type situation, and at the end we would all pray for each other. And on this one occasion, this guy started praying for me, and he started shouting as he was praying, and then he started shouting in tongues in my face, literally shouting and screaming, not quite as blasting, but it was really horrible. It was really intimidating, and he went on and on and on. He was putting his hand on me, and he was literally just waiting for me to fall over so that, he could stop. And it went on for about 5 minutes of him screaming in tongues at me. In the end, I just fell over because it was like, yeah, you can stop now. It was so horrible. And nothing like these people are going through, but it was like, whew. And then he stopped. It was like, whew, thank goodness for that. It was just... And he was repeating the same words all the same time, just shouting at me, That was horrible. So, but that's nothing like what these people... I mean, it's the fact it's not one person. You've got... loads of people just screaming at these people, haven't you? Yeah.
Like a community of people, basically. Probably like your friends and family as well.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. I mean, these are people that you trust and look up to, and you think, you've got to obey them.
Yes.
It must just be absolutely awful. Ben also talked about a place called the Lower Building, where people were held or isolated to be taught a lesson. He witnessed people being physically abused by a minister, including being thrown to the floor, smacked in the chest, and screamed at. After witnessing these horrible things, Ben decided to record himself confronting Jane Whaley about this. And I'm going to play a very short clip.
What?
Because this is intense. And it literally made me feel sick when I heard this. So I'm going to share it with you.
Thank you.
So we can all feel sick together.
Yay.
So this is the recording that he took of him trying to speak to Jane about this. And I think you can hear his demeanour is quite calm.
Sure.
He's trying to reason with her.
We went to her to confront her about why this minister did this and why she hadn't done anything about that minister doing it. So that's what this meeting is about.
Right, but it's not right to use force like that. That's what that could have caused legislation.
You wouldn't be serving God today if some force were not used to you. That's the devil himself speaking out of you.
My grandmother.
Oh my goodness me. She said that's the devil himself speaking out of you. I'd like to say that's the devil himself speaking out of her.
Yeah, so that was her response when he tried to question her, basically. She absolutely lost it. You could tell she couldn't even deal with him questioning her. She had to scream in response. And he was trying to be quite reasonable. He's saying, grandmother, it shouldn't be like this. They shouldn't use force. And she immediately said, the devil's speaking through you. Shut up. Stop it. It's just horrible to hear her scream at him like that.
But if you can imagine now, that's her. And so all of her leaders would emulate her. And so that's what it'd be like if you had 10 of her screaming at you or blasting at you because you did something wrong.
Yeah.
Is that sort of environment. It's not like, now come on, you did wrong, come on, sort yourself out. It would be screaming. In fact, we've heard some videos and it is literally like demonic screaming, if you want to say that. It's just awful, isn't it?
It sounds hellish. It sounds absolutely hellish. So they did eventually build up the courage to leave. And there was an interview with his wife, Micah, and she was quoted as saying, "You harden your heart to where if she slaps you or you see her slap someone else, you just like, I'm not going to think about it, and you just push it down." So it's obviously such a frequent occurrence.
Sure.
You see people slapped, or you get slapped yourself, where you've got to make a coping mechanism to deal with it. That doesn't happen in a normal church.
No,
you know.
no.
I mean, we were in such a strict church, but you never saw someone hit.
Oh,
never.
absolutely, no, never.
It would just never happen.
No, absolutely. And as said, I mean, you wouldn't see anyone screaming at each other either. Really, it's just not normally.
No.
It has happened occasionally, but not normally. Yeah.
So Ben's brother John Cooper, his story was prominently featured in the book that I mentioned last week,
Sure.
Broken Faith. It kind of starts basically with the story of how he and his wife Jessica planned their escape from the church, and they had to do it during a morning service
Yeah,
so
sure.
that they could escape. And John was only 18 months when his family joined the church. But after decades of abuse, he was the first member of his family to leave.
Sure.
So can you imagine being 18 months old and being exposed to all of this?
The thing is, you'd just think it was normal. I mean,
That's
just
normal life, yeah.
just like I thought what I was going through as a child was normal. You know, that's what my friends did in church. That's what I did. I went to church, and this is all I did. It was normal. When I went to school, I realised that there was people were doing other things, and they were playing on a Sunday and doing other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, these kids would go to school
On the compound.
Anyway, so it would have been normal. Everything they saw, they would think, oh well, that's what we do here. You know, we scream at people if they get it wrong. We pray against demons. We, you know, that sort of thing, which is terrifying, isn't it? Really, to think that that's the case.
And so you would make sure that you never broke the list of rules, because you knew exactly what would happen to you.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
as soon as you did cross some line, you'd get a blasting.
Yeah.
It's quite admirable that he was the first one in his family to leave, considering he literally grew up in it.
Yeah, 18 months old.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I imagine most of the other people in his family would have been in there from a little bit older, and they weren't sort of indoctrinated into it from birth, and yet he was the one to leave that. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, that is really,
certainly.
really amazing. And again, if you ever get a chance to read the book or listen to the audiobook, the story of it is really quite inspiring. It's really, really good. I don't know if I would have been brave enough, you know, from 18 months old.
No way.
And then Ben Cooper was, 7 years old, but he was one of 9, so I don't know who the oldest one in that family was.
Sure.
But
And the other thing is, these churches, they sort of play children off against each other as well. So, you know, your brother was blasted. You don't be like him, you know, make sure you're the good boy or the good girl type thing. And they, you know, I've seen that loads where the actual parents seem to play one child off against the other. And then the children also then do the same. They play, you know, one off against the other. So they try to get their, not necessarily their sister or their brother in trouble, but they almost seem to want to be in favour. So it's almost like, oh, I'm doing this, so I'm the one in favour this time. So they get all you know, not so much grief. Not necessarily that they get all the praise, but they don't get the grief. So it's a strange setup, really, and in a funny sort of way, that used to happen with me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm great, oh, look at me, you know. It was like, right, I'm not going to get into trouble now because I'm not the one, you know.
You're the least bad rather
yes,
than the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you'd play one against the other, and that's not good. So you can imagine large families like this as well. It'd be so toxic, so unpleasant.
So when other people in this church have attempted to leave and they've failed, do you have stories of when people have failed, and if so, what's happened to them? Do you know?
I don't have first-hand accounts of anyone that's failed, because I think only the people who have escaped and managed to get away were interviewed. But during one of the interviews, I heard from one of the people who did escape that they would frequently witness people being tackled by the security team, and then brought back into the church, and that was almost a way of keeping the other people in line, because they saw that it wasn't possible to escape.
Yeah, I mean, we saw one interview, and the girl literally just had 10 minutes or something, wasn't it? And she had to run the full length
Yeah.
of the driveway. He said, look, you've got so little time. You go now. I'll be at the end of the drive. Just go.
Yeah. And she had to leave in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the people who didn't manage to escape and were caught, they would
Almost
be
certainly
brought back
punished
in.
and
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. And then almost used as an example of like, see, this is what happens if you try and go into the outside world. It's scary, it's bad, you shouldn't, it's a way of keeping people afraid. If you know that you're going to be literally chased through the woods by the security team, you'd be terrified to leave.
It's horrendous, isn't it? Yeah.
Especially at, 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
You're in a cult.
Yeah.
It's like
You've
a
been
horror
brainwashed.
film. It's like a typical horror film where like
It is.
no matter where you go, somehow the bad guy's already there before you.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly.
It's
And it's almost like because of their security team, it's almost like they know when people are going to leave, because people are encouraged to tell on each other again.
Yeah.
So families live together. So you might have a big house, but you might have two families living together, and so you're encouraged to tell on the other family.
Yeah.
So one of the members in that family might think, I want to get out of here, but Jane will find out, or the security team will find out, and it's just like, this is horrendous. It's
an easy way to police things if you have everyone
yes,
sort of snitching on each other.
basically, yeah.
And petrified.
Yeah.
It's unimaginable. It honestly really is unimaginable.
I don't think we fully can comprehend, the power of this fear and what it will do. You might have a wide open door in front of you, but you're so scared
Exactly.
you will not leave. It's just, it's that sort of manipulation which is the terrifying part, more than having a big chain fence around everything and you can't physically leave. It's just the mind control that they've got over the person. It's like, yeah, well, you can go if you like, type thing,
But these things will happen to
But
you.
yeah,
Exactly.
You're free to go whenever. Just there's like a mental barrier rather than a
Yes.
physical one.
yes,
Exactly. So the second story I want to talk about is the dogs outside.
they're free to leave.
They're free to leave whenever, please.
But they will get blasted.
So I was just interested about your guys' opinion on this, because obviously you guys have been in not anything quite this extreme, but
Yeah.
something comparable, and it's not a world I've ever been part of, as we know. To me, it seems, just to my eyes, it seems clear that the whole kind of blasting thing and the beating with paddles and all this horrific stuff that's going on is more about intimidation
Yeah.
than it is about I'm actually exercising the demon. So do you guys think that the leaders themselves genuinely believe they're exercising something, or is it a case of if we do this, we're keeping these people in line and we can get what we want?
That's a really good question.
Obviously, any answer you give is going to be your own opinion.
Yeah,
rather
absolutely.
than...
It's our own point of view. I think personally, there are obviously hierarchy. There's a level within the church, and I think the teaching would be that you're basically you are casting out demons by doing this. And so I think the people that are involved in it or encouraged to do so would believe the fact that they are casting out demons. I would
think they genuinely do.
I would think so. Now, whether or not they think that at the top, I don't know. Yeah, maybe even then. I think maybe even then they probably think that, yeah, they're casting out demons. I would think.
And I think it probably would have started more simple and more subtle. And
absolutely.
I think it's probably got more extreme and more intense over time.
Yeah.
Like when it was first introduced, say the church started in 1979, that year it wouldn't have been as extreme as it is now that we're hearing. Like it probably would have started with more prayer, more...
Yeah.
And then it... As the church became more like unhinged, so did the prayer and so did the blasting. And
I can see people... I've seen people, get really excited, if I can call it excited, when praying for people and screaming and shouting. I've seen that happen a lot. Now, You can imagine then in that environment, if, let's say, that happened in the church back in the end of the early 80s, say, and the person that was prayed for said, "Oh no, I feel real release because of that now. Thanks for praying for me. I really do feel the demon is gone." And it could be like, yeah, no, this is something we need to do. We've got to be forceful. We've got to not succumb to the demons. Christ is in control. The devil has lost the battle. And I can imagine the words they're saying, like, sort of, you've lost. Christ has won. All this sort of stuff, and would scream and shout. And then later on, that screaming just got worse and worse and worse, and to the extent now it is a blast of, I'm sure they say similar words, but it is just horrific from the videos we've
violent.
seen. Yeah,
it's just violent.
Absolutely. But I can see that how it could develop, and so
just ramp up and become
Yes.
something even more aggressive. But also, like, in the kind of churches that we went to, you were there on a Sunday, but then the rest of the week you were in the world.
Sure.
You were at your job, you were at school, you were watching TV, whatever. I mean, these people are restricted in what TV shows they watch.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't really go outside to other schools or outside
Sure.
of the compound or get jobs outside of the church, really. So you're not seeing, quote unquote, normal life. You're just exposed to this. And so if you're 18 months old and one of your earliest memories is a blasting session, you're going to think it's normal.
That is your normal
And so the
life.
behaviour just accelerates.
Mm.
Because you've been doing it, you've been practicing it since
Yeah,
you were
absolutely.
a toddler.
Yeah, sure.
Literally.
And they would have encouraged, no doubt, children to do similar things. I mean, you see things like, is it the Jesus camp? Is that what it's called? And again, you see the documentary there of children who are 7-8-year-olds who are, again, praying fervently for each other, aren't they? Screaming and shouting and things. Is because that's what they've seen. It's what
It's what you're exposed
they're
to.
emulating, isn't it? Really.
And so if you've been brought up to believe that it's expelling demons and you get no information from outside sources, I think people do believe, some of them at least, some of them do earnestly believe that they're casting out demons.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I can see it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I don't know whoever introduced it, what their motives were. I just couldn't say, because it seems crazy to us as people that aren't exposed to it, but...
I tried to do research to see if they had any biblical sort of background to what it was. I couldn't find anything. I was thinking, whether it said somewhere, some tiny verse somewhere in the Bible that, they beat the person to get the demon out type thing, but I couldn't find anything at all. If there's someone out there who doesn't have a verse or can help, then that'd be good. But I couldn't think of anything personally.
Which makes sense why one of the rules is not to read your Bible too much, because
Yeah.
you may find flaws in the teachings and
Sure.
the practices.
Yeah.
What do you think, as an atheist watching it? You must think it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's horrible, and
Yeah.
my first reaction is we're using the guise of this is an exorcism, this kind of thing, just as a, like, if we scare these children, they'll do as we damn well say.
Yeah.
That's what it
And
looks
just
like to me.
an excuse to be, to let all your anger out or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and make a point, sort of thing. Yeah, that's
There's,
just what it
there's
looks
no
like.
way of knowing what their motives
No.
are. You could very well be right.
Yeah.
And then the congregation end up believing it and becoming indoctrinated to it, but the people at
Sure.
the top may very well just be doing it as a
Yeah.
scare tactic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is horrible to think that they're putting this in place on children.
I'm just wondering whether they've lied to themselves so long now, whether they believe it themselves anyway.
That's a good point.
They're
Even
swept
those-
up in it.
Those at the top probably think, oh, no, that works. No, we are doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And they looked at it over the years and said, "Oh, it's worked this long."
Exactly.
So,
yeah, exactly. And look at little Jimmy. Jimmy's fantastic now. He's one of our leaders. Look, and he works in the bank, and that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's
No night clothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he didn't grow facial hair.
exactly. So and he parks in the right place. So fantastic.
So the next person I want to talk about is Shauna Muse, and I was going to say I find this one really sad, but I find all of them really sad, to be honest. But Shauna Muse was persuaded to join the Word of Faith Fellowship in 2000 by her two sisters, one of who is Suzanne Cooper, the mother of Ben and John Cooper from the
Okay,
previous story.
Sure.
So Suzanne Cooper convinced her sister, Shauna Muse, and said that the church could help her because she was a single mother. She was in not a very good place at the time. She was facing legal problems, and she was also involved in drugs. So I think she thought she could turn to the church. They would help her. They would do all these good things for her, which again is probably a reason that a lot of people join churches.
Absolutely.
They're vulnerable, they're struggling, and her sister was already in it. I mean, both sisters were members, but Suzanne was encouraging her to come along. You'd think you could trust that place.
Yeah, you think so.
And yet.
Yes.
And yet we're talking about her. So after moving to Spindale to go to the church, she said she reached a breaking point when she saw her children and other children being screamed at, blasted, and beaten in the name of God. Her sister Suzanne said that Whaley pressured her into lying about Shauna being abusive to her children when she decided to leave, leading to a custody battle that resulted in Shauna's kids being moved to live with a prominent member of the church. So Shauna basically lost her children to the church because she wanted to leave after like years of seeing this abuse happen. So after years of custody battles, 3 of Shauna's children also left the church and reunited with their mother, thankfully. But unfortunately, Shauna's youngest child is still inside Word of Faith Fellowship and calls another woman his mother. Shauna's sister finally also left Word of Faith Fellowship and admitted to lying about the abuse to have the children removed. She later stated, "A true Christian, a godly person, would never do what I did." So...
Wow. Yeah.
Unintelligible noises?
Yeah.
So she joined a church. She was a single mother, struggling, and her sisters were in it.
Yeah.
And they ended up taking her children from her, lying in like legal documents to have her children taken away from her. And she still doesn't have contact with one of them. Like she's not their mother in their eyes.
Yeah. Just unbelievable. I mean, you can imagine the desperation that this woman would have. Like, I've got to get out of here.
This is a cult in my eyes.
But I cannot leave my kids in it, you know? It's just like, what on earth does she do, you know?
Yeah.
So she obviously did leave and then had custody battles. So she obviously did leave, left them there, and then actually had to, you know, get the courts involved to break them out.
For years as well. Like years of custody battles to get your children back. Can you imagine that?
And you know, a church withholding the mother, you know, the children from the mother.
And willingly lying about the mother.
It's just like, seriously, you know, what sort of church does that, you know?
It would be different if the abuse was true and they were trying to protect these children.
Yeah, sure.
But they convinced her sister to lie about abuse so that they could keep the children. So the abuse wasn't even true.
Why do they want to keep the kids?
New generation of converts.
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking is so they can grow up in the church and so it doesn't run out.
And they don't know any different, do they?
Yeah,
if they're young, that's what they're used to, like we said with the last one.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Exactly, and that's why I think we touched on it last episode, but frequently children will be removed from their parents' households and placed with other members in the church.
Yeah.
And they'll say that it's for all these different reasons, but really it's just to keep the children and to indoctrinate the children. And this is exactly what happened there. The mother wanted to leave and they saw 4, you know, perfectly great converts that they could keep.
Sure.
And so they essentially stole this woman's children from her.
Do you think they purposely, not say advertise, but they become a church where people who are down on their luck and everything else, they bring them in on purpose, you know, so that they can control in that way? I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to say, but
I think that's most churches, to be honest.
Yeah,
Churches
no,
do
you're right.
minister to vulnerable people.
yes, yeah, it's true. No, it's true.
That's certainly how we got involved in
Yeah.
you know, the last couple of churches that we were in. I know you were brought up in Christianity,
Sure.
but if I'd been in a really good, strong place in my life, I never would have stepped foot inside a church because you don't feel like you need it.
No, it's true. Yeah, no, it's true.
It's like a fucking horror film.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
That's why they say it's easier for a
Rich man to enter the kingdom than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. or
basically
something like
that is it. Basically, yeah.
Oh God, do I know scripture?
Oh, you do, yeah.
Fuck.
Don't worry, I know that one as well.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
But that's why they quote, because as a rich person, why on earth would you want to go to a church necessarily? Because you've got everything you need.
Well,
you know.
rich people would go to a church probably to be part of the leadership and to make more money off it.
Yes,
and
that
to
is true.
exploit the vulnerable people.
Who
And-
have
and-
nothing anyway, and yet still have to give 10%.
Yeah.
You guys.
Yeah, but I mean, I do know professionals and rich professionals, it's because they then get this power and authority and everything else again, don't they? It's like,
But are they entering the church as well-adjusted adults, or were they brought up in the church?
Yeah, well, this is it. Who can say? Yeah, mostly brought up in the church.
Yeah. And as the sister, so imagine you're Suzanne, what control does the church have over you to convince you to lie about your sister?
Yeah, sure.
To have her children taken away? I can't imagine ever lying about you, Arthur. Like, if you had children and I knew you were a good father to them, what could lead me to purposefully lying about you?
Yeah.
For someone that I've known less time than you, like...
It's got to be intimidation or blackmail, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, I mean, it hasn't got to be, obviously, this is all alleged, as we know, but
of
Yes.
course.
you'd think for something that serious, it would be a case of, you'll, like you said last time, a lot of the police in that area are in their pocket. They're all in it together. The district attorney or whoever it was you were saying about had given up getting involved with it.
Yeah.
There's going to be corruption there.
Yeah.
In any of these systems, and it's not localized to this exactly, but there's going to be corruption. There's going to be sort of things happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. It's got to be something like that.
Yeah.
It's got to
Yeah,
be.
I think so. Yeah.
It's just so awful. And I've linked in the sources an interview with Shauna where she talks about this, and also her sister as well,
Sure.
because they both left. And I'd encourage you to go watch it, hear it from her words. And it's just very, very sad. I can't quite wrap my head around any of them, but especially that one, because the sister,
Yeah.
selling you off, basically.
Absolutely
And
horrendous.
it's just, I can't imagine how hurtful that is. So the next story is from Danielle Cordes, and she's actually Suzanne Cooper's niece.
Oh,
what?
they're all related.
So a lot of
Wow.
a lot of this story you'll find is interwoven, which is quite interesting.
So you get one family and you get masses all, join as well, don't you, really?
Exactly. So Danielle was only 18 months old when her family moved to Spindale, and her mother was invited to a seminar at the church by her sister.
Yeah.
So that's Aunt Suzanne Cooper. Danielle stated that everything seemed normal at first, but as she got older, she started to realize that the church controls everything about your life. She was quoted as saying, "Out here there's so much freedom, but in there I just felt so much captivity. No questions asked, you do what you're told." Danielle says that her mother was taught that when the children misbehaved at home, she should take them to the ministers. It was like taking them to God. And this was one of the hardest parts of the documentary to watch. You can, Tom, watch this with me.
Yeah,
but
this was absolutely terrifying.
you can see something switch in her as she's about to tell this story.
Yeah.
You can see the pain, and I cannot even imagine what she went through. But Danielle alleges that when she was 8 years old, she disobeyed her mother, and so her mother called Jane.
I mean, she said she didn't even know what it was.
She can't remember what she
can't
did.
remember what it was. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I kicked the cat or something. It was, she couldn't remember this terrible thing that she did,
Something insignificant.
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
absolutely.
It was something like not listening or disobeying, and I think her mother had just reached a breaking point, like you do sometimes with 8-year-olds.
Yeah, sure.
But her mother called the minister, and Danielle says in the documentary that just the waiting was almost the worst part of Jane on the phone said, "I'll be right there," and from the time that she said that, she was just like frozen, waiting for it to happen and waiting for it to come. And she did turn up, and Danielle alleges that she was beaten with a paddle for hours to drive out the demon of disobedience. And it was just awful to watch her talk about this story. And she said that one of the worst parts for her was knowing that her parents allowed this to happen to her, and that they thought it was good for her.
Yeah.
They thought it was in her best interest.
It was initially even the fact that she said when she heard the car's tires on the stones outside the house, her stomach dropped, and I could just imagine that. I could just,
Knowing what you've
knowing
seen,
that, absolutely, yeah,
knowing what you've seen at church of blastings,
yes,
would be terrifying enough.
yeah,
and that's without any of the physical beating.
But it was until midnight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She was beaten with a paddle until midnight. And the mother at the end of it said, you got a real good pounding or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, she
almost like she was taking like pride and a glee in it, sort of thing.
that it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her mother said, wow, she really beat you to a pulp.
Beat you to a pulp, that was it. Yeah.
And this is an 8-year-old girl.
Yes.
And it happening not by your own hand as
Yeah.
well. You're allowing, effectively, a stranger to come into your home and beat your 8-year-old child. That's unimaginable cruelty.
Yeah.
Unimaginable.
With a wooden paddle.
Yeah, it's got to be I mean, if you have to beat a kid, which you shouldn't do, you're not doing it with a wooden paddle if it's about retribution. You're doing
Absolutely.
it to prove a point, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're taking something out of that. There's
Yes.
something in it for you.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you
absolutely.
couldn't do it for hours.
No way. No way.
Absolutely unimaginable. And she said that Jane was saying, cry out, rebuke the demons. And she was just so in pain or so afraid or whatever that she couldn't physically do it. She couldn't make herself cry out. And so the beating just kept happening. And it happened till after midnight when Jane decided that it had been enough. So that's what children are going through in this church.
Probably still today as well.
Yes.
Heavy air quotes, church.
I mean, that's the terrifying thing about this is the fact that this...
No one's stopping it.
No, and this church is still around today. It's not like, oh, this happened in 1843 or something. It's like, no, if you go to Spindale today, it will be there and there'll be people in that church today. It's, terrifying.
Absolutely awful. So when Danielle was 17, she was introduced to Matthew Fenner. So we're going to talk about him next because he's the next story. And she was encouraged to date him. And I think they called it walking out in a friendship relationship. That's what the phrase was called when you were starting to court somebody. She unfortunately witnesses awful abuse that Matthew is put through. And she finally makes up her mind that she has to escape the church not long after this incident that we're going to talk about in a minute. And she absolutely courageously, this is amazing, but she runs away in the middle of the night when she is 19 years old. Unfortunately, all of her family have remained in the church and they've cut off communication with her completely, and she feels like she is alone in the world. And she just says at the end of her interview that she hopes that one day she'll be able to see her family again and that her mother will smile at her again.
Yeah, my goodness.
That's so horrible.
Which, it still speaks to the fact that even after everything that's been done to her and, she just wants to make her family proud.
Even now, yeah,
Even
absolutely,
now, years after, they've cut off communication with her. Imagine, like you had, Tom,
yes,
where your mum literally said to you, you are dead to me.
Yeah.
You're done. I'm going to tell people you're dead. All this horrible stuff. And now all she wants still is just to see her family and she misses them. And how could they be so cruel? How could your parents just cut you off?
Incredible.
It's not a situation that, I don't know, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is really, really heartbreaking. And again, she's so brave to be 19 years old and not even, and I don't mean to sound offensive, but not even like a well-adjusted, confident, independent 19-year-old. She was brought up in this environment.
Absolutely, yeah, certainly.
How strong would you have to be to just decide one day, enough is enough?
This is it, I'm going, yeah.
An oppressive environment as well.
Yeah.
It's one that probably taught her that, I imagine, this is guesswork, none of this is based on anything other than just my own thoughts, but probably quite a misogynistic, men are in control, the women do what they're told sort of environment.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
That's Christianity, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure.
Most religions. To be fair.
And this would be an extreme one. She also said that when she was younger, Jane would tell her that if she ever left the fellowship, that she would end up in a mental institution because the outside world is so horrible. And she believed that. She was terrified of that. But she still knew she had to do something. And imagine knowing that you're going to lose your family. So you're not just leaving a club and you're going to go live with your mum.
Yeah.
Like, you're leaving the club, but you're also losing all of your family, all
Yeah.
of your friends. You've got no car, no job, no money. Like,
Yeah, no clothes, nothing.
Where would you even start?
Exactly, what would you
even
do?
I
Yeah.
wouldn't even know what I would do.
No.
no. And she was very, very brave.
So yeah, I had another question. It's more kind of a lack of understanding on my part than anything else.
Stupid atheist.
Yeah, unenlightened. Within the rules and within the story, there are plenty of things that are of the normal world. So like, it says things like when you buy or sell a car, when you go to a new neighborhood, this sort of stuff. So people are living quote unquote normal lives,
Yeah, ish.
not
yeah.
necessarily in the sanctuary or,
Sure.
or
The
whatever.
compound, yeah.
Yeah.
Why are so many people having to escape then? Why aren't more people just not coming to the compound? If they're allowed to go to different colleges and learn their own things and do this sort of stuff, I understand there's a level of control, but why are so many people having to literally physically escape like it's a
Like a lockdown thing.
it's an army base in the middle of the desert or something? Why
Yeah.
are people just not coming there?
I think some of them are living on the compound. So some of the stories, like Danielle, she was physically living like inside the estate. I don't know what you would call it. And then some other people are placed in the homes of other members. So you're living together. So some of the families, like Matthew, we're going to talk about in a minute, when he joined the church, his family was invited to come and live with one of the higher up members, almost to, I guess they would phrase it as that they were supporting you or helping you, but you're under their eye then. You're under their watch, and you can't really go. So some of them would be escaping from other members' houses.
And then there was
as well.
a girl in the story that went to college, and so they encouraged another girl from the group to go to college with her.
Okay.
So it was always, so she couldn't go by herself.
There's
there
no
was someone else.
freedom at all. Really.
No.
No, and like in the rules, if you remember that you had to be chaperoned to go certain places as well. So you're told that you have the ability to leave and things like that, but someone would go with you, a member would go with you to make sure that you were safe and you were taking care of yourself, and people are encouraged to keep each other accountable and things like that. So I think some of the stories are physically escaping from the church walls, as it were, and then some of them are just, it's more of like the psychological control that they've got to escape from.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
to a certain extent, I mean, I sort of left the city and went to university, and so had the opportunity to escape, if you can imagine that way, but I didn't. Because I was controlled. Yeah. So, it doesn't matter whether you are controlled by, barbed wire fences or not, is a mental state in which you are controlled, really. You've got a barbed wire head, which you can't escape from, It's like, how do you get out of that? How do you, stop that control?
And like in the rules, you had to check with Jane before buying a house so that she could, quote unquote, check out the neighborhood. Well, maybe she would encourage you to be very close to the church, or maybe during that process she would encourage you not to buy the house and stay with someone else and things like that. So they would know where you lived, they'd know what car you drove. If you didn't turn up, the security team could just come to your house and say, why didn't you come to church this morning? Like, you wouldn't even necessarily feel safe just not coming, because there would be people saying, why aren't you here? Why didn't you come? Unintelligible noises.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing to wrap your head
It's
around, but if
because
she controls even where you live.
It's hard to wrap your head around because we're not in the cult. But sort of being brought up in that sort of environment, nowhere near as bad as that, the control is fierce. It's just like,
it's deep.
It's so deep. It's and so they could go anywhere and still wouldn't escape. No, it's very difficult.
Just unimaginable again, isn't it? But and it's still happening now, allegedly. So Matthew Fenner and his family joined the Word of Faith Fellowship in 2010. Matthew had two siblings, and together with their mother, they were invited to come and live with a prominent member of the church and one of the founders, Brooke Covington.
That's a fake name if I've ever heard one.
Vincent Adult Man. Matthew's mother was struggling at the time that they joined the church, and it's believed that she was also unhappy with her son's sexuality. Matthew was gay, and as with most versions of Christianity, the Word of Faith Fellowship does not tolerate homosexuality, and they believe it's a demon that must be expelled.
Mm-hmm.
He was encouraged to date Danielle, as we mentioned from the last story, to help cure him of his sexual demons. After 4 years in the church, things got even worse for him, and in 2017 he testified in a police affidavit that he was held captive by members of the church after trying to leave a service and severely beaten for hours. Wikipedia states that in January 2013, Fenner was allegedly beaten for hours to break me free of the homosexual demons, and the next day he made his escape and drove to his grandparents' house, where they then filed a police report for the assault. 5 members were indicted in December 2014 and charged with kidnapping and assault on Matthew. Several court dates have been set, but cancelled or rearranged since. And so as of yet, I can't find any information or updates online at all about how the case is going or if it's even still being pursued.
Yeah.
Which again is no surprise with what we talked about last week, that some of their members are incredibly high up, and some of the district attorneys have even been quoted saying, "I just got tired of going up against them." Like, there doesn't seem to be much action being taken against this church at all, even with serious allegations like this.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the documentary goes into this quite heavily, and it's absolutely horrific, isn't it? How that almost it was at the end of the service, and he knew that at the end of the service, lots of people would be at times kept behind for additional prayer, and it was his turn, wasn't it? Really, he was kept behind for additional prayer, and he just knew that this was it, type thing.
Yeah.
And the way he explained it, and Danielle was there in the sort of sanctuary, sort of, but at the back watching almost, you know.
Yeah. So Danielle, who was, they weren't boyfriend and girlfriend because Matthew was gay, but
Yeah.
Danielle and him were in a relationship, and she was made to watch this, and she was even made to participate in this. So she was one of the people who was laying hands on him and was praying for him, and it went on for hours again, and she got really worried for his safety at one point because his eyes glassed over and he was just being shaken and beaten so much that she was pretty sure he was going to die from this assault. It was so bad. And one of the people who were indicted was Brooke Covington. So again, that's one of the people who he's been placed to live with. This is someone he should be able to trust.
Yes,
this
absolutely.
is a family member in his eyes.
Yeah.
This is someone I live with. This is someone who's helped me. Imagine this happening to you, but at the hands of someone you trust.
Yeah.
And so this was the event that prompted Danielle to leave. Was she saw that Matthew escaped, and she saw the horror that he went through, and she just thought, I can't be a part of this anymore. So she escaped in the middle of the night and went to live with Matthew Fenner and his grandparents, which again is good for both of them.
Yeah, fantastic.
But that is just one of the most horrific things, honestly.
It's just unimaginable.
Yeah. And imagine that years later, the people that did that to you still haven't been held accountable or brought to justice at all.
Yeah.
Like, that was in 2013, so we're talking almost 9 years ago now, and still no court date for the 5 members indicted.
Horrendous.
5 members were indicted, like, physically brought up on this, and then it just hasn't been pursued. It hasn't.
Sure.
That must be heartbreaking. Because it's so hard to come forward with stuff like this anyway, and for people not to listen to you. And so the final account that I just wanted to go over is by Jamie Anderson. And Jamie was only 4 when his family joined the church. And when he was around 9 years old, he alleges that a church member held his arms back whilst his mother sat on his legs and began to hit him with a paddle. He stated, quote, It hit me in many other places than it was supposed to, but they didn't stop because I needed a breakthrough. The demons were taking me over, end quote, at 9 years old.
Struth.
By your mother, again.
It's the fact that they sat on his legs and held his arms. I mean, that is just horrendous.
To your own child,
Yeah.
because you believe that demons were taking him over. What does that do to your brain at
Good
9 years old?
grief.
Imagine, like, your mum and your dad are probably that age, the only people you properly trust, or
Yes.
the only people you should be able to
Yeah.
trust, really.
Yeah. I think something like that would change you forever.
Oh,
You would never be
absolutely.
able to go back
No.
to just being a normal child.
No, no way.
And a quote from Wikipedia states that many former members described Jamie's treatment as some of the harshest that anyone suffered. Anderson said that he was also frequently sent to a storage area called the Green Room, and he was one of the alleged members of the 5 boys, which were mentioned in the Discovery Plus documentary. In 2002, 5 boys from the church were all pulled out of school for undermining church authority and held separately in isolation for more than a year. They would be forced to listen to tapes of Jane preaching for days on end, and some ex-members have also alleged that these boys were beaten by ministers for deliverance. So not only was this horrific and deeply traumatic for the boys, but it was also used as a scare tactic to the other young members in the church. Sarah Anderson, who is actually Shauna Muse. Yeah, Shauna Muse's daughter, one of the ones that escaped.
Sure.
She stated that it made everyone else, all of the other kids, like, we're going to walk the line because we don't want that to happen to us.
Yeah.
So
It was just horrendous. I mean, just to put someone in isolation anyway, and these were young lads. I mean,
14, 15.
14-year-olds, to be put into isolation for a year, and then to have to listen to her preaching on tape. And they were saying it was like 24/7, wasn't it? Really, with the her words going through, and you just think, oh my goodness, that would drive you, literally could drive you crazy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's...
And other ex-members that heard about the 5 boys stated, like, we never knew what they did, but we knew it must have been so, so bad because Jane Whaley allegedly stated, like, there is no God in these boys. What they've done is turn their face from God. But none of the congregation ever knew what these 5 boys did. But Jamie Anderson, in one of his interviews, stated that he'd listened to the radio.
That was it.
That's it.
That is what he had done that earned him isolation, forced isolation for a year.
Yeah.
And that is technically undermining church authority, in quotation marks.
I don't even know. I can't even react to that.
No, I know.
Personally, I don't know what...
There's no words at this point,
there
is
really
there?
isn't.
There's no words.
The thing is that what infuriates me, you just think, oh yeah, this is awful. And then you think, actually, this is supposed to be a church. This, and that's
not a prison.
No, and if you were telling me all about this, like, oh yeah, that's a cult, cool, yeah, that's what cults do, I suppose. And then you turn around and say, no, this was a church. They were supposed to be teaching about love and God and forgiveness and all of the above, and yet it is absolutely horrendous. And that's what I can't get my head around. I listen to these, I've listened to this, and it's so cultish and it's so anti anything which you would imagine to be a church. And yet all that is coming out is are these facts really, isn't it? It was awful, horrendous. Is a phrase, but that would drive you crazy. That's, you cannot, get out of that unscathed.
At such an age where your brain is forming as well.
Yeah, sure.
Like, imagine that level of brainwashing before you're a fully grown adult.
Yeah.
You get that would form part of who you are for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jamie Anderson did manage to escape, and he left the church when he turned 18 years old. But his entire family disowned him, and church leaders told the people that he'd left behind in the church, and people that knew him and loved him, that he had become a drug addict. So his family believed that he turned his back on God and was definitely going to hell. So again, it's scaring the people who have stayed that
Yes.
the second you leave this place,
Yeah,
your life will
absolutely.
go to shit.
Yeah.
You'll become a drug addict, or you'll die, or you'll end up in an institution.
Sure.
It terrifies you so that you never want to leave, because you hear these stories that people who have left and it's ruined their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't true. He became a doctor, he went to medical school, he started a life. And yet everyone back home was told he's nothing, he's a dropout, he's
Sure.
going to hell.
And because they're not allowed to even so much as handle a newspaper,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
Yeah, of
listen to
course.
a radio,
Headlines,
they're never going to find this out.
No, of course
Yeah.
not.
Ever.
And, I mean, one of the rules was you're not allowed to talk to people that once they leave.
Yes, of
You kn-
course.
So his family wouldn't be able to call him every Friday night and say, how are you doing?
Yeah,
How's your-"
what's
like,
going on? Yeah.
They don't know anything other than what they're being told by leadership. So his family believed that he'd become a drug addict. And he finishes his interview by saying that he is most worried about his nephew and the other children who are still inside the church.
Mm.
And all he wants to do is help them.
Yeah.
I have a quote here.
Because I remember, thinking about it in that room and thinking, I wish that someone cared. I wish that someone got me out of here.
So that's him talking about his time in isolation and his time being in the green room, and how just all that he hoped for was,
Sure.
he'd be laying there in the dark and he'd think, why is no one coming for me?
Yeah, of course.
Why does no one care that I'm going through this?
Yeah.
And so that's all he's worried about is the other children still left behind. And you can
Wow.
hear it in his voice.
You can,
hear
yeah,
the-
absolutely. The sincerity and the worry and the...
And that interview with him is linked down below if you want to hear it, from his words. And
Sure.
It's
but
tricky.
it's hard to watch.
It's tricky because he says, why isn't anyone coming for me? I wish I could help them, that sort of thing. But you put yourself in the shoes of someone coming back in there to do something about it. How many people in there aren't even going to realise they need help? They need helping, saving,
sure.
liberating. They'll most of them will probably be so brainwashed they don't realise it's not the normal thing.
Yes, certainly.
And they'll think the outside world is worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by
Like,
far.
what they're going through is the good stuff.
Yes.
The stuff happening outside is dangerous and scary and awful, and that's what they'll think, is that people coming from the outside are the ones who are going to put them in danger.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
So, the Word of Faith Fellowship do deny all of the allegations
Of course.
against them, of course. And they've claimed in statements that they are the victims of religious bigotry.
Mm.
And that's where all of these claims come from.
And
that,
persecution?
yep.
Strange.
So they claim that all of the ex-members that have given interviews are lying with the claims of abuse, and even have an entire page on the official Word of Faith Fellowship website set up to refute the claims made against them,
Sure.
entitled Response to Media's Lies page.
Which sounds like something Donald Trump would have on his own personal website.
The
Yes.
fake news page,
Yeah.
basically. They also have multiple YouTube videos created to try and discredit the former members, such as Danielle. I just got possessed. Trying to paint her as a liar, and they've even included clips from her testimonies as a teenager to try and catch her in lies. And it's just awful. It's just really, really awful to see these videos. And they also have videos from Jamie Anderson's mother stating that he is a liar and he had a good childhood with no abuse.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine how awful that must be for the people who have been brave enough to leave and come out with their stories, to see their own family members disputing them or silencing
Absolutely.
them and calling them liars. That's just awful. And again, it's something they wouldn't have to do if these claims weren't true, because they could be way more open and they could be
Absolutely.
communicative even with their family.
But it's the fact that they've, got these really formal videos for each one of these stories.
Yeah.
And it's on their website, and it's just terrifying
Yeah.
to think, why would they need to do this? It's just awful.
That's what I was going to say. It's like when someone catches you out lying and you give far too much information,
Yes,
and you
yeah.
just know if someone gives you too much information, they are lying.
Yes,
And
Yeah.
it's like,
absolutely.
what reason would they have to lie about these things? What reason would they have to
Yeah.
make up these claims? If if it was a simple case of, we didn't get on with these people or these people weren't right, you
Yeah.
wouldn't want them in your church anyway.
Of course not. No.
You wouldn't want drug addicts in your church
No.
because that's the whole point. You've cast them out.
Absolutely.
In air quotes.
No, you'd say, well, the video would be, well, they've left, but we pray that God will be with you and all the best of wherever you're going. You wouldn't say, but you were lying. It's just like, no, I'm sorry. It's awful to watch.
And the thing I find quite disturbing as well is Jamie Anderson's mother in this video refers to her love for her son in the past tense. She says, I loved him.
Yes.
We all loved him. Not that it's a current love, it's a past love.
Yeah.
So now that he's left, we no longer love him is kind of the implication. She doesn't state that, but by putting love in the past tense, it's really unsettling to me.
Yeah.
Imagine him seeing that.
Well,
after
he would have seen it.
Yeah.
Oh, he
Of
would
course,
definitely have seen it.
Absolutely.
Imagine him seeing that and hearing his mother say, I loved him in the past tense. I can't play the video because the Word of Faith Fellowship is so strict with their copyright, but I'm just going to show the screen to Arthur so that he can see the setup of the video that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I would encourage you to go on their website. It's all there available for free to watch the video, and it's called Lies Exposed. A loved son turns to AP with concocted story. So those are the 5 stories that I compiled just for this one. But again, as we've said, we've barely again scratched the surface. There's 40 plus people who interviewed with AP News, and then there's over 100 people featured in the Broken Faith book as well. So we are literally just scratching the surface with the few that I could find for this video. And I was also surprised how these stories linked and were so interwoven with many of the same people being featured in all of them. Like Suzanne Cooper was the sister of Shauna, and then the aunt of Danielle, and then the mother of Ben. And,
Yes, of course.
How it all kind of links, and then Brooke Covington was linked in all of them, and Jane is linked in all. It's like one big web.
There's no way of separate. They're all related. Everyone is linked, and you cannot escape. Basically, is the point here. Yeah,
exactly. You must feel, in a good way and a bad way, that this is your family.
Yes, absolutely.
Essentially, they're all linked. All of these stories are adding up, and then the Danielle and the Matthew one were linked, and then the Matthew and the Brooke one were linked.
Yeah.
And it's just so twisted and so dark. Brooke being the member who had custody of Shauna's children also. So Shauna's children, when they were taken away from her, were placed with Brooke.
Of course.
And Brooke was also the person who hosted Matthew and his family.
Yeah,
and it it goes on, and it's just like a dark web.
Yeah.
You must have felt suffocated, and everywhere you looked was someone that was linked to someone else.
Sure.
It must be so limiting.
Yeah.
Overbearing.
Overbearing, yeah.
Claustrophobic.
And there's so many bits of information that we still can't touch on, even. We haven't even started with half of the allegations about members of this church.
No, I mean, there's so much. Again, in the documentary, there's lots which, we haven't even mentioned, isn't there, really?
Yeah.
So I was just interested to sort of almost wrap it up. Have there been any investigations into Jane and Sam themselves? Have any charges been brought up against them, or of all the things that have come to light, just been a general, the church itself is the one in the spotlight sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's actually been no charges ever against Jane.
Okay.
So the only members who have ever been indicted are the ones who were indicted against Matthew for the assault, and then also some other members for fraud allegations and things like that. But Jane herself has never been brought to any charges.
Has she ever been alleged to have taken part in any of these things? Have any of the things that have come up been Jane did this to me, or has it all been...
It's all allegedly Jane did this, or it would be people did this under Jane's command.
Okay.
Generally.
Yeah.
So the people who have committed the worst acts, people will say Jane either knew about it, or Jane authorized it, or Jane asked for it, but it doesn't tend to be that she committed anything herself. It's more that people are doing it under her order.
Absolutely.
So that she's not the one culpable. Allegedly.
Allegedly, of course.
Which happens a lot with, dare I say, with criminals. It's when you have gangs and things, it's normally the bosses will actually get the minions to do all the dirty work, so that the people at the top are clean. And it's a similar sort of setup, really.
But then the mafia normally get done for tax evasion or avoidance, so maybe that's
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
It's the control she has over people to be able to
absolutely.
do this as well. It's just frightening.
Yeah, certainly.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I mean, there is so much information here and so much that we haven't even talked about, that's scraped about. I mean, the security systems and, obviously other people. And there was, in the documentary, one of the leaders who was was doing operations on feet, which is
and damaging people's bodies forever.
The other churches that they're linked with, there's allegations of trafficking.
And forced labour in their international churches.
There's so much that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
But we feel as though almost, we're going to stop there because this could be like a 10-part series otherwise, literally.
Yeah, but on that, I will just say that in researching for this, I found the Pretend podcast, and series 3 of his show, entitled The Prophet, is 11 episodes all about the Word of Faith Fellowship and the allegations, and he dives into it much deeper, and he has interviews with ex-members and things like that. So if after this episode you feel like you still want to learn a bit more, you can go to the Pretend podcast, and there's hours of his content, which he's researched much more than I did for this one. So please go listen to him. Yeah,
absolutely. But if you'd like us to, do a little bit more on this, then let us know, and we'll, later on maybe sort of look into it a bit deeper again.
Yeah. If it's wanted, like, we don't want to kind of overload you with like 10 hours of Jane Whaley.
And they say, I didn't want that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, absolutely.
We want to hear what you guys want, really, and if you're enjoying this kind of content. Arthur was saying that it was his favourite episode to date was part 1, weren't you?
That was mostly because of the sort of jovial nature of it.
The list,
I did enjoy that. This one has been significantly more somber, I think.
Heavy,
But it's very interesting, and I learned, a lot of stuff that I just would never have heard about before.
You wish you hadn't, for instance.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but yeah,
maybe.
Get in touch. Let us know.
Yeah.
And then part 3 on the cards if you want it.
Sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
We'd be very, very happy to talk more about it because we find it really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we are going to wrap it up there.
I think so.
So on that note, this has been the Sad as Fuck podcast. Thank you all so much.
Incredibly depressing podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to go eat some pizza.
Indeed.
So thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. It's a weird thing to say because you can't really
informed.
You can't really enjoy hearing about these horrible things.
Sure.
But yeah, we hope you got something out of it or you found it interesting. And we really, really appreciate it. Don't forget that you can email us and you can message us on Instagram.
And this will be on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I mean, you may very well.
Go to speech therapy.
You may very well be watching this on YouTube.
Yeah,
so, leave a comment down below if you are. You can email us, Instagram us, and we will see you next week, as always, to reclaim our Sundays.
Yes.
So,
bye.
Bye.
Allegedly.